Food fortification was identified by the World Health Organization as one of its four main pillars, and also in collaboration with the Food and Agriculture Organization, they've been able to also impute that into the health and food systems of various third world, or I should say developing countries around the world. And here in Ghana, back in 2007, a law was passed, and adequately, just by 2011, a project was started by the Food and Drugs Authority of our country, the Republic of Ghana. As a result of that, the project is ongoing and supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We're having a lot more nutrients added into certain type of foods in our country. We have Kofi Esel. Kofi Esel is a principal regulatory officer of the FDA, and he's in the studios to give out a lot more content to this whole project, as there are also ongoing discussions in the media on the subject. But basically, Kofi, when we talk about food fortification, and I know in normal science, it just means that you want to add a lot more nutrients to what food is in existence. And in this very aspect that the FDA is dealing with in the project, how does it go?
Well, thank you very much. Let me also say a very good morning to your viewers. Yeah, like rightly pointed out, food fortification, it's the process of fortifying food. And when you talk about fortifying the food, what it means is that you are adding something that normally the food doesn't have. Okay, there's a difference between food fortification and the other aspect where you enrich the food with. So there's a food fortification and enrichment. Enrichment meaning that the item is there, but you're adding more to it. And the fortification is that it doesn't have it, and you are putting it in there. And it's usually done to alleviate some nutritional deficiencies within the population. And so if, for example, we realize that a particular community lacks some nutrients, as a result of that, you are having some clinical manifestation of one disease form or the other, then you look at how do you alleviate that problem. And one of the cheapest way of alleviating some situations of this nature is to put that nutrient, that micronutrient, into the food. And usually you are dealing with micronutrients. They're micro in nature, but then they play very significant roles in our bodies, vitamins and minerals and what have you. Okay, you might not consider them as so important, but they help in lots and lots of biochemical activities in the body and then other metabolic activities, and therefore they are required. And so that is one thing that we would do, or it's done by governments. If you take the salt iodation program, for example, it's a fortification of a salt, because we realize the community or the population have very little access to iodine. And in some instances, in some communities, the situation was so prevalent that you have over 90% goiter rate within those populations. And so you needed to alleviate goiter and other associated iodine deficiencies disorders. And therefore you need, when you talk about fortification, you always talk about the transporting material, transporting medium. In the case of iodine, the transporting material became salt. And there are reasons for selecting the transport, bioavailability and all that, the means of making it accessible to every member of the community. Because if you're not careful and you select the wrong transport, then it becomes very difficult for people to buy and have access to that particular iodine, the nutrient. And so currently in Ghana, like Raji pointed out, we started this project we call the National Food Fortification Alliance. And it involved industry, the standards organization, the regulatory institutions, the Ghana Health Service, and so on and so forth. Initially, it was a voluntary thing because we were then trying to work at it and make sure that it becomes acceptable to every member of the of society or the industry. Yes, of course, because it was going to come with some technological challenges, cost to industry and all that. And so getting everybody on board initially from that angle was okay. But with time, government thought it wise to make it a mandatory requirement on the part of industry. So today, it's part of the Public Health Act the Act 851 of 2012. And so it is now mandatory for certain food items to be fortified.
How adequately have you worked with industry and even the manufacturers and especially the importers from 2011?
Well, it's been very cordial. Like I said, initially it was a voluntary thing. And that's why we formed the National Food Fortification Alliance. And this involved the vegetable oil manufacturers and then the wheat flour manufacturers. And so we had to work with them, work at the standards, even with the bakers. Because when you are fortifying the wheat flour, for example, with iron, okay, what type of iron do you have to? So there's a whole lot of science into it, such that when you eat the bread or when you bake with the bread, the bread will still become acceptable to consumers. Okay, so we have to work around all that and agree on certain specifications and then standard formulations for the fortificant and then the transporting medium itself. And so eventually all these things worked out well. And now when we're able to settle in and we allowed it to operate for some time, then the law was passed. Initially, it was a ministerial assent that was given to it. Then eventually we had it passed when the Food and Drugs law was being reviewed into the being made part of the Public Health Act. And so that is how it has worked out for the time being. Yeah. And so it's been very well carried out. Importers themselves will have to comply because they have no option. You either comply, you don't bring your commodity into the country at all. And then we have import control mechanism at the port where they have the test kits. And so they sample these commodities to see whether the fortificants are there. So they do the qualitative assessment at the port, first and foremost. And then when it comes out and it hits your warehouse and all that, we can further pick either from the warehouse or from the market and then do the quantitative analysis. The quantitative will allow us to tell how much of the fortificant is in the product. If you fall outside that scope, we'll go and physicate that. And I recall unfortunate situation for some import of wheat flour. Eventually we have to divert the use of the wheat flour to the production of starch for plywood processing. Yeah,
at least putting it into some use.
Yes, but not to, because the idea is that we want Ghanaians to be healthy, and so put in iron such that blood, we don't have anemia and all that.
You've mentioned iron, but in trying to do all this rollout and do the inspection, what variants of fortificants are we talking about? Is it iron?
Yeah, we have for salt, you have the iodine, potassium iodide, with the wheat flour. It's a whole gamut of materials, but we're looking specifically at iron. And when you take the vegetable oil, we look at vitamin A. With vegetable oil, the interesting thing about the vegetable oil is that, vitamin A is already in the palm oil. Now, when it goes through the refinery, the bleaching, and then deodorizing, you take away the vitamin A, and so you put it back, so to speak. And so when you see the fritols or all the palmolene variants that you have on the market, they all have the vitamin A put back into it. And we always use a particular symbol to let the consumer know. We did a lot of public education on that, so that when you see that symbol with that fortified statement beneath it, you get to know that yes, this commodity is fortified. But currently, beyond these three commodities, the salt, the wheat flour, the vegetable oil, we also targeting infant
milk
products, not infant milk, but what we call the complementary foods. Winning foods, for example, and there is a particular company, Yident, in the Bronga-Havo region, that is being used, and then it's been rolled out already. And so you buy food. Now, it's not only about the general population, but you're also looking at infant feeding. And so you have taken into consideration that kind of program as well. And so you buy the Tom Browns, prepare breakfast for the kids, and they all come with the fortificant micronutrients, the vitamins, and the other minerals. And so it's a very important one. But with the wheat flour, for example, the target was pregnant women and then girls of reproductive age.
Okay. Talking about targets, we know that for products, and especially for fast moving consumable goods, they go in line with distribution. Since you're working with the Ghana Health Service and your allied partners, have you identified where there are deficiencies, and so if they are supposed to be the marketing in terms of the distribution of those goods or go into certain directions or certain targeted populations?
Well, certainly with every project you may have some challenges. Let me take the typical iodinated salt. Currently potassium iodate has found other uses in the LCD televisions that you see. Potassium iodate is one of the major ingredients that they use in the production of that.
Sure.
And because of that, the cost of potassium iodate is gone up. Okay? And so now another industry that is booming is also looking for the same ingredient that you are chasing to fortify the salt. And so what means that the salt, the availability of potassium iodate will have a challenge. If it is even available, the cost will increase. Already, it's becoming a big problem for you because of the nature of the industry. It's artisanal in nature, and so people are not so keen about, industrialized settings. It's easy for you to work with them, but with the artisanal groups, it's quite a challenge. And so that has become a problem for us. But we're working at that. When you take the vegetable oils, the problem has always been with the importers, okay, because we don't have a lot of local manufacturers, because with our local manufacturers, it's not a palm oil, and the palm oil, once it's not bleached, it's not deodorized and then refined, you still have the vitamin E in there. And so the Fritos and other companies that are doing that, they are doing very well. The issue has to do with the importers and the situation where most Ghanaians will want to start a business before they get to know that
These
there
are
are
regulations.
And so a consignment of vegetable oil hits the port. They don't have the right
fertilizer.
They don't have, it's not fortified, and you definitely have to divert the use either for soap making or other things. It's not very a pleasant thing for them, but that is what we have to do, because if we don't put our feet on the ground firmly and then push this agenda, people will take us for granted, and then the whole thing will collapse on our heads. And so we try as much as possible to discourage people from putting on the market the non-fortified vegetable oils. And we also want it to be demand-driven. And so when you have sensitized consumers and people go out there and only make a demand for fortified vegetable oil, then you will run at loss if you don't pursue the fortification. But people should also get to understand that there is the problem with consumers getting to know what the problem, the situation with food fortification generally. People don't seem to understand why they should buy that particular food item. And so the Ghana Health Service is doing that. It's doing it bit by going out to them with more messages on food fortification. It is a very important project, and I think that we have to pursue this particular agenda of sensitizing the public. Go out there, look out for the symbol, buy products that bear those symbols. And when we do that, there becomes an incentive for those who are even bringing them in or producing, because it comes with some cost to them. Naturally, you wouldn't want to buy the fortificant and then with the machines and equipment, with the technology of doing this fortification.
Because I was just about to ask you, I was just reading some literature on it the whole of yesterday, and you seem to have made inroads, especially in certain regions, etc.
Yeah.
When it comes to pricing, how do you make sure they don't impact negatively on both sides, for the consumer and for whether the importer or the manufacturer?
Well, certainly, let's admit that at any point in time, the consumer will have to pay for that extra cost. But all these things are worked out before the projects are rolled out. What would be the percentage increase of the cost of the product to the consumer? And there have been situations where industry will have to absorb this extra cost because you want to do business. It's your corporate responsibility. If you take, for example, the vegetable oil, originally the palm oil that you are bleaching contains the vitamin A. It is through your technology, that you have taken it out. So we're only asking you to put it back, okay? So industry has graciously taken some of the cost, but there could be some minute, infinitesimally small amount of money that probably will be passed on to consumers. With the potassium iodide, for example, we don't think it is going to increase the cost of salt, substantially. But hey, let's look at the cost of health, of good health, and then the cost of falling ill. Which of the two do you want to?
There's always an opportunity cost for something.
If you have a child who is iodine deficient, and that child is an imbecile, okay, because of poor iodine exposure in a fetal state, and then the child grows with a permanently, impaired brain. What is the cost of that to you as a to the family, to the mother, the parents, as against paying a little for iodinated salt? Okay, and so we cannot, put premium on good health. So if there's a little cost to it, I think it is proper we absorb that and then pay that money, that extra cost, so that we can enjoy good health. So food fortification, generally, it's a very good activity. Ghana is not the only country that is going through this particular project. You have it in several other countries, and it has always worked. We've worked at it to alleviate serious disease conditions among the population.
When you go to the website of the WHO and the FAO, they work a lot more with sub-Saharan countries and also with countries in Asia, etc. So they say, well, after making all those inroads in many of the regions or the territories in those countries, they seem to face certain challenges. For you as the FDA, what are some of the challenges you've been facing?
Well, beyond what I've mentioned, I don't think we have any other challenge.
Either with importers, perhaps also?
No, the importers, the biggest problem with the importer is that he doesn't know what he's supposed to do. Currently, we are taking a lot of wheat flour from Turkey. And it looks as if all the Turkish companies exporting wheat flour to Ghana now have understood what is going on. And so they themselves have come up to, as it were, work out some systems to ensure that these problems do not present themselves to us in Ghana. And so we've worked with them. We've given them the formulations, all the specifications for the fortificants. And so this is what they are working at. And then it's working out very well. If you take the vegetable oil, at least all the companies here in Ghana that are producing vegetable oil are all fortified. And then we pay them regular visits. We do the test on site. We pick samples of the products, bring them onto to our labs. We do the qualitative test to confirm that the standards are not being violated, because you have a specific amount of vegetable oil that has to, fortificant has to be in the vegetable oil. And so all these things are being done. In some sub-Saharan African countries where these programs are taking place, and the challenges they have, and probably some has to do with opinion leaders and religious interpretations to a lot of things that people do. Situations where, if you take, for example, this polio, where in Pakistan some people, some health workers were shot, in parts of Nigeria where people were saying that, all these things were ploys by the Western world, to make their children infertile and all that.
Sterile,
yes. When we have situations like that, then you have a problem with any public program of the sort. But fortunately for us in Ghana, we have never had any of these challenges, and we believe, we hope we're not going to have them, because it is not going to work well for us. The problem that cropped up some few years ago had to do with a natural therapist who believes that anything beyond natural is evil, try to make some noise. I'll put it that way. I remember I was once in the studio to encounter
a local therapist.
Yeah, he believes in only natural therapy. There's no need for you. He believes that anything you add to what is natural becomes poisonous, and so even using iodinated salt he calls that chemicalization of food. And I was wondering that you have to go for what we call Boayiwa. Boayiwa is
because that is part of my line of question as well, especially when there are concerns being raised about organic and inorganic and what is said to be natural and non-natural. At what point do we say that, well, we're going to do it in such a way that its long-term use, even though perhaps may not have been undertaken in a certain study over a prolonged period, may not have effects on people perhaps decades later? It's been known that booms in the US and Europe, etc., in food, etc., has been the cause of many cancers and things that have been experienced over the period.
So when you talk about organic, what is organic? There's a technical definition for it. The fact that I left my fowl to, run around the house and not feeding it with hormones and things like that, does not necessarily translate or mean that the meat from that bird will be organic meat. Because as the bird moves around, I don't control what it is eating. It might even have eaten something that has a chemical in it, okay? And that chemical can stay in the meat. And so there is a well-defined conditions under which a product can become organic. I may have a farm here, okay? And there could be another farm. There's something we call drifting, where you can have fertilizers and other things that were used on the other farm being drifted onto my farm. I did not spray, I did not use any agrochemical on my farm, but drifting alone will have caused the material to be transported onto my field, and that will make my product inorganic, if it's so to speak. And so we should be very careful the way we define what we call organic and all that. Certainly, if you're exposed to some agrochemicals or anything of the sort, okay, you may have to suffer some consequences. But you will suffer the consequences because you fail to observe what you should have observed, or what should have been, what you are supposed to do. So, if, for example, you were told that after spraying or applying a particular agrochemical, allow this period to elapse before you harvest. Why do we say that? Because when you observe that withdrawal period, what will happen is that the chemical will naturally, dissipate, and it will not be present in the food. But if you don't observe the withdrawal period and then you use the product, then the chemical will be present and then you'll be exposed to it. And that is what is going to cause the problems to us. Or when you even misapply, okay, this particular chemical is not suitable for this produce, then you misapply it. And so failure on our part, either having extension officers to help with farming operations, or our farmers themselves not observing the basic good agricultural practices, could lead to some of these problems. But if you take the fortification program, all these things are well researched into. Okay, they are well researched into, and therefore they do not necessarily, create any problem for us. For example, if you take the iodinated salt, what we're saying is that, granted your body needs, say, 50 micrograms of iodine in a day. What we have observed is that taking your food normally, using the ordinary salt from the sea, which is not fortified with potassium iodate, you are making about 25 micrograms. Looking at the current iodation levels, if you take food with iodinated salt, what you are adding to the 25 that you are getting from your normal food sources is just about 50 micrograms. So 25 plus 15, it comes to only 40, right? And then you need 50. I'm using hypothetical values, but that's the real situation. You need 50, and then you are getting 40, even with iodinated salt. And so where do we say that, adding iodinated salt to the food leads to chemicalization of the food? And I don't even understand the terminology, chemicalization of food, because normal sodium chloride is a chemical. And so once you put ordinary salt into your food, it's a chemical that you have added. And so people should not use words that they don't understand to confuse consumers. And so it is a fact, yes, that when you use fortified food, the benefits that you derive are so enormous that if you fail to do that, and let me tell you this, when we started our data program, those communities that had over 90% goiter prevalent rate, go there today and then look at the situation. And then you see, so then the argument was that, then why don't we concentrate only on those areas? And I'm giving you the scenario. What your body needs is about 50 micrograms. And then your normal eating habits or eating capacities, whatever you are getting, is giving you 25. So what it means is that you are still lacking a whooping 25 amounts of units of that particular micronutrient. And iodinated salt is adding 15. Wouldn't you rather want to balance that and take the 15 and add it to the 25 and get 40, and you'll be better off than having only 25. And so it doesn't create any problem. So nobody should think that, I mean, taking iodinated salt and it will cause an adverse health effect, or using fortified flour or fortified vegetable oil will cause any problem. It doesn't cause any problem.
You are talking about consumers. Consumers, once you, from what you're telling me, you tend to engage a lot more the manufacturers and the importers, etc. How often do you engage the consumers so that they can identify?
Yeah, we use the, it's unfortunate you don't have the shot to show the fortification symbol, but if you take any vegetable of wheat flour, you see a certified symbol with a word, the inscription fortified, you know. And then if you have not fortified, and then you decide to use that because of the post-market surveillance activities that we carry out, where we sample vegetable oils on all these products and then we test. If it turns out that you have not done it, and fortunately for us, we've never encountered anyone who has not fortified and yet used the symbol. It is not something that you will want to toy with. That will be a very grave offense, and they will take you on and they will deal with you seriously.
And the Yuletide is coming, and it's a period in which we tend to have a lot more of products that perhaps may be expiring, but even beyond those ones, products that do not meet the standards, and people who want to push through the last consumables they have in their warehouses. How do you hope to check that?
These things do happen, and I recall when I was doing my youthful days. No, I'm saying my youthful days as if I'm an old man. I'm not. You know, early stages when I joined the Food and Drug Authority, we're doing
public education,
post-market surveillance. We still do that, where you break up the city into various sectors or zones, and then your officers on the ground all the time. There was a particular spot at Katamant, and I always use that as an example. They call the place Donkumi area, and there are some guys there. If they are watching us, they know me very well, because I was always clamping on them. You know, they will go to warehouses, and as if they know that getting to this time, a lot of businesses want to get rid of old stock, and so they go and virtually get some of these commodities at giveaway prices. There's nothing wrong if you have food commodities and then you want to sell them at reduced prices so that they don't expire in your premises. There's nothing wrong to do that. But there's everything wrong if you decide to now manipulate the dates on the products. And so they will take some guys into an enclosure, you know, and they are so smart. They use this nail polish remover, which is a solvent, you know, and with a toothpick, clean parts. You know, these dates codes are they do digitally, and so they can manipulate. And we know with the way it is written, from the 0, you can do anything. And so you have black ink, and then they have indelible ink, and then they have this nail polish remover. They can clean and then add on. And so from October, 2014, you can have, say, November 2015, from those figures. And then they were doing some of these things. And so we kept hammering, we kept chasing them and all that. What we do is that our attention is still focused on these guys. We will also do a lot of public education. And thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. And one of the messages that we always give out to people is that no business person is a philanthropist. Every businessman is in business to make money.
To make profit.
And so, certainly. And so don't just go out there and then think that because it's the Yuletide, people have reduced goods prices drastically. You know, a tin of tomatoes of this size sells at this price. You go there, the product has been reduced about 90%. Nobody will know that. You need to be smart, you know. And if even the prices are reduced, why do you buy more than what you need? Okay? And so don't think about your pocket. It's been said about an African, and I always want to say that, you know, it's an insult. You know, that in Africa, people think of what to eat than what is eaten. Okay? So we're always thinking of our tummy, how to fill it. You know, so naturally in our can adage, they say, pintimbi on me. But unfortunately, pintimbi or Yaruba, you fill your tummy, and every day you spend the money you have saved in the hospital. And so people should be very careful when they are buying things around this time. Vegetable oil, wheat flour, rice. And with rice, one of the things that they do is that they go and buy, you know, they are popular brands. And so people don't...
They buy the bags.
They buy the empty sacks.
Okay.
And then they will fill these empty sacks with some low grade, some old quality rice, and then stitch them again. Fortunately for us, and consumers should also take note of this, there is no way when you are restitching, the needle will go through the old stitch holes.
So you see that.
And so you see the old stitch holes, you know, left uncovered. So if you are buying any bag of rice, and the holes, old stitch holes are there, and they are open,
you know that
then you know that this is not...
They've been tampered.
It's been tampered with.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And then when you see anything funny about the date markings, be also careful. Be careful not to buy that. And then people who do itinerant sellers, you see, cornflakes or breakfast cereals is another commodity that they work on.
I just bought one yesterday.
They have to be very careful. You know, it doesn't mean that the FDA is not doing what it's supposed to do. We'll have criminals, and then that's why the police will always be there.
And you could have goods that have expired, but you may not have gone to the shop to know because you feel that the shop owners...
So around this time, you see, regulation, regulation is dynamic. Regulation is a shared responsibility. There's no one country, nowhere, anywhere.
So if consumers notice this, what do? They come and report to any office?
If you see, if you go to buy an item on the shelf and it's expired, first and foremost, draw the attention of the shop owner to it.
Okay. If
the shop owner fails to, you know, adhere to this, and the last time I was talking to one of your network, these small shops that you see in the street corners around our homes, some of them think that unless they sell the item has not expired. Okay, so we call it the boja shops. Unless the item is sold, it's not on their shelves. To them, the item has not expired. And it was so pathetic. I was talking to one some time ago, and it's like, somebody is going to so what is going to bought it, you know, cash. You know, so I've not sold it. So once you have not sold it, doesn't mean that the thing has not expired. So it is left for you, the consumer. And the question is, will FDA have men to follow every Ghanaian shopping? No. And so there's also the responsibility on the part of the consumer that as you go out to shop for this Christmas, I want to leave people with this phrase. If you're in doubt, don't buy, don't use.
Okay. If you're in doubt, don't buy, don't use. And that's Kofi Essel. And Kofi Essel is the principal regulatory officer.
Principal. There are several principal regulatory officers.
A principal.
Thank you very much.
So he's not the only one. A principal regulatory officer at the FDA. It's just a public service post, right?
Thank you.
All right. So thanks for joining us, Kofi.
Welcome.
I hope to have you again sometime. So if you're in doubt, don't buy, don't use. Okay, that's our phrase as consumers for this very Yuletide. And that's where we bring a curtain down on our program today, the AM show. And as always, brought to you by a great team here on Join News and Multi TV. And thanks for sharing those messages on our interactive platforms on Facebook and Twitter. Well, we'll call it a day. Do join us again same time tomorrow. Bye.